Hi guys. So in this video, we'll see about the SCCM Infra and the Hyper-V lab. Okay. So we'll create our own lab environment. So by using the Hyper-V, we will look into that Hyper-V lab requirements also. Okay. So let's start. So understanding the SCCM infrastructure is very important as the SCCM admin. Okay. So in this video, we'll take some example of the infrastructure. Okay. So let's start. So imagine we are starting a new company called IT Sol, and we have around 10,000 employees and 20,000 devices, including end user computers, servers, printers, and etc. So we need an automation tool to manage all these devices at a single point, right? So best tool for the Windows platform is the Microsoft Configuration Manager. Okay, so consider these terms, and then we can start the designing the configuration manager infra. So the minimum requirements to start a infra. So what we need, a domain name. So we need to buy it. So in our example, we can say itsol.com. Okay. So like google.com, something like a companies.com. So here I'm just taking the itsol.com as the domain. And after that, we need a domain controller to manage this domain. So we need to configure AD server. So after that, to protect this domain network, we need a firewall, and so we need a networking tools. And then to store the configuration manager data, the SCCM data. So we need a SQL database. So SQL server. And to install the SCCM tool, so we need a dedicated server. So we can call it as SCCM server or configuration manager server. And then to work seamlessly, we can use additional MPs and DPs, which means management points and distribution points to distribute the content to the devices seamlessly. Okay, to manage those devices as well. And then for file sharing, so file sharing in the sense, so if the users want to share any files over the network, so definitely we need a FTP server. And then to connect our infra from home for the work from home users, so we need a VPN server. And to support the work from home users from the SCCM, like if you want to deploy any software or any application to the all employees, which includes the work from home employees and the intranet employees as well. So we need a CMG, it means cloud management gateway. So it helps to deploy any content or any policies from the SCCM. Okay, so we need a CMG server. And then for secure logins, we need a SSO tools like Duo, Microsoft Authenticated, Google Authenticated, something. So we need to make sure the authorized users only logging to our network. Okay. So these are the minimum requirements to start a company and to start the SSM infrastructure. But in our lab environment, we don't need all these items. So we can only use AD server and also the SQL server and configuration manager server. So we don't need the additional MPs and DPs. So because it's a very small infrastructure in our lab environment. So AD server, SQL server, and the configuration manager server is enough. Okay. So let's discuss the Hyper-V lab requirements now. So I'm considering, like for a minimum 16 GB physical RAM computer. So if you have a 16 GB RAM in your machine, you can create a mini lab. So I'm just considering a minimum requirement, 16 GB physical RAM. So if you have, more RAM capacity in your machine, you can use the more capacity to your VMs. So for 16 GB RAM computers, so you can use 12 GB for the lab, and the rest, the device, the main OS will use the rest of the RAM, and at least 500 GB free space we need in the hard disk. So for the ADVM, we need a 2 GB physical RAM and 500 GB virtual hard disk. So virtual hard disk in sense, it is not going to take the 500 GB in your physical hard disk. It is only considered like a 1020 MB only. So whenever you know add the data in this hard disk, it will increase the size. Next VM is configuration manager VM. So it needs a 4 GB physical RAM and SQL Server VM. So we can use 4 GB for this as well. And Windows clients, 2 GB for each client. So you can use one Windows 10 computer, or if you have more RAM, you can use the number of Windows 10 virtual machines. Okay. So these are the minimum requirements for minimum 16 GB RAM computers. Okay. So in your system, if you have 64 GB RAM, you can use, for AD, you can use 4 GB, for CM, you can use 12 GB. So like that. Okay. So in the real-time environment for configuration manager, based on the sites you are going to configure. For example, you are configuring the primary site standalone, or you are configuring the CAS central administration site. So based on this site which you are going to configure, the physical RAM need to select. Okay. Okay, fine. We'll discuss that later. No problem. So next thing is the required items to download. So we need a Windows Server OS for the AD server, SQL server, and everything. And Windows client OS like Windows 10 or Windows 11 for the client machines. And SQL Server software for the SQL Server. And SQL Server Management Studio and reporting services. And native client software and Windows ADK and WinPE. And finally, Microsoft Configuration Manager current patch. Okay. So these are the minimum items we need to download. Okay. So once the items are downloaded, so we are good to go with the Hyper-V Lab installation. Okay. So I'll provide the links to these required items in the description. Please go through the links and download the required items. Then in our next video, we'll start configuring the Hyper-V Lab. Okay. So until then, see you soon. Have a great day. Bye.